pragmatic decisions lead to bad products. So in my work with different teams throughout the last couple of years, there's one topic that pops up again and again, which is pragmatic decision making. The teams are pretty proud of themselves that they're able to make pragmatic decisions, have short conversations and be fast in decision making and just be very pragmatic about what to do next and so on and so forth. But the problem is when I dig deeper into that, when I ask them what makes a decision pragmatic, and also like in our conversations, in general in our conversations, I notice that many of those decisions are not really pragmatic, but rather random. And therefore, here are my thoughts about why I think, first of all, why I think pragmatic decision making is in general not the best way to build great products anyway, or not necessarily, let's say. And the second, how to spot if it's a pragmatic or a random decision, or basically what's the difference, and then how to actually get out of this trap based on a couple of scenarios that I've seen. So first of all, the question why I think it's not necessarily the best way to build products is because the question is what pragmatic really means. And from the examples that I have seen, most of the times it meant going the path of least resistance or making compromises. Either way, like when you do one of these two, then your main goal with that is actually creating harmony within the team, or harmony between teams, or between team and management, or whoever, right? But it's about creating harmony and not necessarily about building high impact products. The problem is that high impact problems and high impact solutions are rarely in the path of least resistance, and that they are rarely in compromises. So while you're avoiding having those painful conversations, you are actually missing out on opportunities and missing out on those solutions and problems that could really move the needle both for the customer and the business. Therefore, if that is your not necessarily definition of pragmatism, but if that is what's happening when you are pragmatic, which is you are avoiding painful conversations, then this is harmful for your product. What is pragmatic is the context is clear. You have your goals, you have done your homework, you're somewhat aligned on strategic direction and so on and so forth. I say somewhat because we're not in a perfect world. So there's no perfect alignment anyways, or perfect clarity. But, more or less, everything's fine. You have found a high impact problem to solve. You have found a high impact solution to solve. But, for example, that solution is just too big to build. Then you ask yourself, there's a target group that has this problem that we have identified, right? What is the outcome for this target group when we solve this problem? And then you ask yourself, what other solutions are possible to address the problem in a way that they create the same outcome for the target group? And out of those solutions, which is the one that makes sense to build, that is less effort than the one that we had in mind, right? So it's still about the problem, the same big impact problem to solve. It's the same target group. It's addressing the same outcome that this target group is trying to achieve, or the outcome that we want to create. But now you're finding a different solution to this string, to this connection, to this path, than the big effort solution. That is pragmatic. Yes, it involves another round of conversations, and maybe also a bit more discovery to do, maybe, but it's still a pragmatic decision instead of building the big thing. So basically, the difference between those two examples is, in the first example, the main goal is creating less pain and creating harmony. And then the second example is that it doesn't matter if it creates more conversations, more pain, if you need to go into more painful conversations or not. The main goal is to create something that is of high impact. So now, having these two differences, let's talk about some scenarios that I've seen so far. One scenario is that a company always asks their teams to go for low effort solutions. So whatever it is, just make sure it's low effort. So this can turn into a trap for the teams to only think in low effort. That means they always think small. And when you always think small, like at one point you just keep thinking small, then you don't think about finding high impact solutions anymore, because your main goal is to find low effort solutions, whatever that means. And typically this makes a team to build small iterations instead of big differences. How you can get out of this is to instead think, okay, we have this, like to pause for a second and say, okay, we keep thinking about small effort solutions, but let's take a step back and think of high impact solutions for a high impact problem to solve. And then let's go back to what I have just described, right? So that then let's go back to the thinking of what is the smallest thing that we can build to address this problem, right? So that is the way to get out of that scenario. Another scenario is that a team is kind of misaligned on the goals within the team, or between the team goals and the company goals, and between the tactical and strategic aspect, and so on and so forth. And so there's a pattern in the team to really jump between solutions. Why don't we build X? Why don't we build that? Why don't we build, like always jump between solutions without a clear rationale. So basically, the next time, like when you see there's this, like your team, right? I'm describing your team, who's easily jumping between solutions and always having these discussions of why don't we build this? Why don't we build that? Instead of whatever. Then pause for a second and ask, based on what do you suggest to build on X, to work on X instead of Y? Based on what information, data, evidence, other than your own opinion, your stakeholder's opinion, or another team member's opinion, right? And that will probably reveal something in the lines of, because it's easier, path of least resistance, or because we can just build it immediately, which is not necessarily the most impactful solution, right? But we can build it immediately. Or maybe there's a question like, what is the justification for build Y? Right? So we don't have a justification to build that. So we could also easily just build X. And that is a big sign of misalignment. And then you need to go and have those painful conversations to create this alignment so that your team cannot jump around anymore so quickly or so easily. A third scenario is that you come up with this high impact solution, but you notice that there are so many dependencies that even though this is a high impact solution, it's just very, very difficult to build. You think that, but you have not actually necessarily looked into it if that is really the case. So if you're in a situation where you think, like on the surface, it looks like the high impact solution is also a high dependency solution. When somebody says, "Oh, why don't we just work on something else that has that is of lower impact than the solution you were talking about?" And if the answer to your question, why do you want to rather work on X instead of Y, is that it's the dependencies, then ask the team, how can we make it happen despite the dependencies? And go figure out first if those dependencies are really standing in your way or not. Because maybe it's just an assumption from you and your team that these dependencies are difficult to work with. Maybe they are, but maybe they are not. Once you have done your research on that, then you can really say if you should work on the other, like if it makes more sense to work on the other or not. But only then you can really say it. Until then, it's just random to say, yeah, let's just, go for the other one. So I hope, like these were 3 scenarios. I hope this gives you an idea of what I'm talking about when I say pragmatic versus random decisions. And what I would like you to take away from this is really to define what pragmatic means, right? Pragmatic does not mean it's a path of least resistance. Pragmatic means something else. B, the next time you see somebody saying, like someone in your team saying, why don't we just work on X instead of Y? Ask this question based on what information, data, evidence, input, other than your own or your stakeholder's opinion or another team member's opinion, justifies to work on X instead of Y. And three, maybe also giving you the sensibility of, or the understanding that when you hear somebody saying, we make pragmatic decisions, to really dig deeper into what that actually means for that person or the team. Yeah, so these were my thoughts again. I'm very curious, like, is this a pattern that you see in your teams as well, or other teams that you have worked with? I'm very curious about that, and also about scenarios you maybe want to share. Like, I have shared three. Maybe you have seen different scenarios in which you have observed your own team or other teams in jumping around and calling it pragmatic. Very, very happy to hear from your experience as well.